You got a new memoir out that really sort of tells your whole story, and I know centers a lot on your time here as a reporter with the Houston Chronicle. Just what can you tell us a little bit sort of about that book and some of the things that is in it and that people are saying about it?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it starts with where I grew up in Pennsylvania, where I was a competitive figure skater and I skated pairs, which is where the guy throws you around and it looks all dangerous. And, had I don't know, a bright career in front of me potentially. We competed at nationals twice. And then when he decided to branch out and find another partner, I fell apart and I ended up, I was struggling with depression and eating disorders, and I ended up turning to drugs. And for the next 9 years, off and on, I was dealing with addiction until I got arrested. And after I went to prison, I got out and became a reporter covering prisons, which is how a lot of y'all know me, from covering prisons here for local papers.
And in terms of and I'm going to have actually a bit from that audio book that we can play in a second. Just in terms of how that story and your own history led to your reporting at the Houston Chronicle and kind of informed your reporting as a Texas prison reporter. How did all that work?
It was actually so random. I never set out to cover prisons. I guess I thought it would almost be trite. Like, of course, the felon would be covering the felons and people would just find it predictable. But then the death penalty reporter retired, and my editor at the time, Diana Hunt, was like, hey, do you want to take on some death penalty coverage? And so I started with that. And from there, I expanded into covering prisons and juvenile prisons and, mental health and criminal justice more broadly.
What stands out to you in terms of the state of sort of the Texas prison system, sort of juvenile incarceration specifically, and sort of how you're reporting, I know, which is, and now you're with the Marshall Project, kind of how your reporting has informed change maybe in some ways?
Well, I mean, I think the juvenile and adult prison systems face parallel but different problems. And I think the juvenile prison system is actually significantly undercovered and probably a lot worse. They're under investigation by the DOJ right now, and they've had obviously years of sex abuse scandals that pretty much all Texas media has covered. But in terms of the adult prison system, I think that one of the big problems has been a lack of staff. There hasn't been enough staff. I mean, there's also lots of problems with general conditions and maintenance and medical care. But at the moment, we're seeing some of the effects of there not being enough staff. Some of the things that I've focused on, I've written some about the staffing, but I've also written extensively about the medical care, including the fact that the Texas prison system has been so reluctant to give people dentures if they don't have teeth.
I'm going to play a little bit from the audio book right now, Corrections in Ink, a memoir, and then we'll talk a little more with Keri.
I have problems. I am out of clean clothes. I cannot find my glasses. My English paper is late, and my pockets are not big enough for all the heroin I have. But honestly, more than anything, I want a cigarette. I'm only 10 minutes from where I'm going, and it's cold outside. The sun is deceptive. It looks like a nice upstate New York morning, but really it's December and the wind is whipping up from Ithaca's gorges. I stop walking and push my fingers deep into my pockets in search of a parliament. In a minute, there will be police, with questions and handcuffs. By tomorrow, my scabby-faced mugshot will be all over the news as the Cornell student arrested with $150,000 of smack. I will sober up to a sea of regrets. My dirty clothes and late English paper, one of the last assignments I need to graduate, will be the least of my problems. But that's all in the future. Right now, I just want that cigarette.
That was from Corrections in Ink, Keri's memoir. Keri, I'm curious how sort of the process of you kind of sharing your story and all of the sort of trouble backstory, like what has that been like? And also, I can't help but think like there's a parallel here between your own story in terms of sharing it once you got out of prison and sort of turned it around, and what maybe the stigma that other inmates face as they get released and then have to go back out into the world.
Yeah, sure, totally. I think that I think that this is part of what I hope people who are in prison get out of the story, is that they can see someone who's been in similar positions to where they've been and has been able to realize a second chance, because so many people who are incarcerated never get to realize a second chance. There's so many systemic barriers that make that so unlikely for so many people. And I hope that people in prison will be able to see someone who's had a second chance. And I hope that people who are not in prison and read it will also understand some of the reasons why not everyone does have a successful second chance.
As we talk sort of about the prison system in Texas specifically, there's an idea, right, in I think the American justice system, and certainly with the prison system specifically, that there is supposed to be some sort of rehabilitative process that goes in. In your experience, in terms of being in there and then also covering it in depth in the way that you do, is there a rehabilitative process that goes in? Because I think ultimately that's what we're after in our society. I mean, some people out there will say, sure, lock them up and throw away the key and just incarcerate people. But I think ultimately we probably all win if there is a rehabilitative process that takes place. Do you experience that? Do you see that?
I mean, if there were more effective rehabilitative processes, we would not see the kind of recidivism rates that we do. And I think this whole sort of discussion about punishment versus rehabilitation, in some ways, I think it's more helpful even to frame it in terms of public safety. Because in theory, at a bare minimum, prisons should be improving public safety, right? That's the point. And if you don't give an adequate amount of rehabilitation and you subject people to dehumanizing treatment and separate them from their families and support systems for long enough, it's predictable that that might not improve public safety. And, I'm not saying that, no, there's no purpose for prisons.
Sure.
I'm just saying that, I think we often evaluate this in terms of rehabilitation versus punishment, and those are helpful metrics, sure, but in the end, if this is supposed to be about public safety, that probably hasn't really gotten enough consideration in the long run.
It's an incredible story from Keri Blakinger, and certainly the context and conversation right now about the prison system specifically here. Keri, real quick, where can people sort of get the book? I mean, is it out, available already? Just what can people know about where to find it and get more of this incredible story?
Well, locally it's at Brazos, but also it's on Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Kindle, and as you heard, there's the Audible.
Keri Blakinger now with the Marshall Project, again, former prisons reporter with the Houston Chronicle. Keri, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate you sharing your story, certainly with us here and for so many other people as well. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.